we belong to all of life. We're not separate from all of life, and we need to get back in harmony with all of life if we want to be alive. And so I say, make your businesses, make your art, make your personal expressions around that conversation, because without a sustainable ecosystem, without a planet, you're dead. So what good is your brand?
Hello and welcome to the Dynamic Creative Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan DeMarcus, and this is your source of tools and inspiration for today's independent artists to activate, align, and empower the creative path to thrive with fulfilling and meaningful work that effectively pierces through the noise. In this week's episode with Wes Parrish of the Obsidian Blade, we tap into how to find our authenticity and voice as content creators, the importance of both depth and playfulness in our creativity, creating commerce aligned with our ecosystem, tapping into a 5D reality, pragmatic tools to meditate like a boss, and more. I'm a hard stand for everyone listening right now to have access to the tools to level up and win as a creative. I'm privileged to have many brilliant creative folks in my life, and when we're constantly pumping out work and art and being self-expressed, it's inevitable sometimes for us to hit a wall because life can be super crazy, and sometimes all we need is a serendipitous little insightful nudge once in a while to get us realigned on our path towards productivity, prosperity, and well-being, because a lot of the systems in place in our society right now are set up for us to fail, to be in perpetual debt and poor health as sick and numb consumers, indoctrinated and intoxicated on fear, consumption, distraction, and comparison. Therefore, we need to be accountable beings of empowered action and courage to thrive and persevere through it. I can't think of a more fitting, multidisciplinary maverick of wisdom, power, and creativity to join us on today's conversation, who is himself an artist, empath, healer, teacher, coach, cultural tastemaker, and cosmic rabble-rouser who leaves wakes of clarity behind every single step he takes and interactions he makes. My dear friend, ally, and homie, Wes Parrish of the Obsidian Blade. It's such a pleasure and privilege to be able to have a conversation with you today, my dude. How you doing?
Really great, and thank you for that awesome intro. That was fantastic, and I saw the light and the mission and of what you're here doing for not just yourself, but for all the people that you serve. And yes, to champion a way through the noise to that clarity of your power and your purpose, especially in these times.
Yes, most def. I feel it. And Can you give us a brief context of stepping stones on how you ended up where you find yourself today at the helm of the Obsidian Blade, what the Obsidian Blade stands for, as well as what's currently been present with you?
Yeah, I've been really diving into my origin story lately and really honoring how much actually Star Wars played a part in this whole show. And, I saw it, I'm a little bit older, so I saw Star Wars in the movie theater in 1977. I was 5 at the time, and both my dad and my mom took me, and that sparked kind of maybe some sort of primordial remembrance of the hero's journey, as well as the powers of being a wizard. And I was like, okay, I'm down for that hot wizard action. So I by the time I got into my teens, I was kind of this combo mix of when people ask you the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, okay, definitely it's going to be a combo of rock star, because I play guitar, make music, artist, because I want to be the next Andy Warhol, and Salvador Dali combo, and also wizard. And I was like, just give me all three of those and I'm cool, so the journey is really, it took me on this path where, when I was 18, my mom gave me this book by Carlos Castaneda called Tales of Power. And that really connected me to some, ancient wisdom of central Mexico, and really ignited again that kind of warrior's journey about, there's a lot of talk in that book about being impeccable with your energy. Mm-hmm. And that theme really stuck with me at 18. I was like, okay, we only have have so much energy in the day and in our life. What are you going to do with it? And kind of like, I just kind of was already on like, you know what? I've had some fucked up experiences with drinking at an early age. And so I quit, all sorts of drinking like around age 19, never did the bar scene. And I kind of almost had these moments in my early 20s of going like, dude, are you sure you're living life? Because I would just be at home making tracks, playing guitar, studying shamanism, walking in the forest, like taking my first plant medicine journeys by myself and like reconnecting with the land. And I would say that I was, a real crucial part of my journey was listening to myself. That seemed to be like one of the key medicines was just like, you know what, there's, like you said, and before, like there's a world out there that is ready to take you away from yourself. And I was like, no, this sounds egocentric, but I was like, I know I'm way too interesting to be distracted from what I'm onto. And so it was really just having that faith to be like, no, I'm onto something. The world might not quite see it yet, but I know it's true for me. Nice. And so I'm going to continue to just kind of like, it's good, when I get invited out to a ton of parties and, of course I went out, in my early 20s, but I just kind of really was way more solo than a lot more people that age. I knew what I wanted and I just stuck to it. And that did require, some social sacrifices. But I think that helped me really become sensitive to when I was true to myself and when I was betraying that truth, And so, my early life took me on different studies of Tibetan Buddhism, traditional shamanism, and, leading myself through, a career as a, designer and web designer and art director. I've worked at companies such as Nike and Yamaha Digital Music, done a ton of project launches for them for their music division, and, just helped out dozens and dozens of independent clothing brands and jewelry designers really, find their voice and, come up with a plan to get their product to market. And really, through all of that, coming on the other side going like, okay, now it's time for me to have the ultimate confidence and come out of what they call the spiritual closet and say, you know what, those early things that I felt in my 20s and teens about like, fuck organized politics and organized religion and dumbing down of the masses, all my kind of punk, skateboard, goth roots, as well as the universal shamanistic, timeless truths that I was tapping into. I was like, you know what? I feel like, we've seen it now. The world is more ready for that. They're ready to escape the noise. You either from the rise in entrepreneurialism to the rise in wellness industry and people doing yoga and just taking care of their health and getting into mindfulness and like learning like, oh, maybe I should like drink water in the morning instead of a bowl full of like sugary cereal. Like just little things going like, let me be the master of my energy, my power, and then once I'm not, like a bitch to the dominant paradigm that doesn't seem to be really going anywhere.
Right.
Okay, well, I've come forward and said, okay, it's time, let me craft my school of both, cleansing and training called the Obsidian Blade. And, for me, that word, the blade, a blade is cutting. It's about clarity. I just had always this natural inclination to be dedicated to serving people clarity, the truth beyond the noise of what is, correct to them, what is in their heart and how they want to do it in their own style. And so the Obsidian Blade was born and I've been doing it for about 4 years now. And really started off just as a way to really get my voice out there, but now it's shifted into like, again, cleansing services where we do traditional healing, shamanic obsidian healing on people if they're feeling like their energy is off, to coaching, to then training people on how to align with what a lot of people talk about now is like New Earth or the Aquarian age, and how really, we're in that moment, and we've been in this moment for quite a while, where we're seeing massive disruption, with tech and with social design, and really seeing the effects of what does it mean to be both out of alignment with your inner environment and then out of alignment and disconnected to your outer environment, and how we're really reclaiming both of those spaces so that we actually can not only survive but thrive as a human species.
Real talk, my dude. And the unfolding of the further calibrating alignment you mentioned towards that almighty thrive has definitely been underway with all your offerings and content that you've been sharing with the Obsidian Blade. And because of that, before we dive into it, I just want to acknowledge you as, such an asset to a lot of us in the community and beyond, with how much value you're instilling in the world with the content you create, the way you show up, as you're relentlessly like forging such an important path towards helping humanity remember its power. And I just really want to big you up for that, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, man. It's a pleasure. It's a joy,
Yeah, no, it's a joy for sure. And the sheer power of being of service is a joy that I'm really starting to get more present to. And, for many of us, including myself, we spend a significant portion of our lives where the first thing we're thinking of when we get out of bed every day is like, okay, how am I going to get mines today? How am I going to hustle the hardest as possible so I can come up? And, that can only get you so far. And although I still definitely got, plenty of work left to do, there's still a point in my life after doing my own personal work and reflections where I really started to feeling some deep shifts, where the tone started shifting from how can I get mine today to, how can I be of service? How can I give back today? And when hopping out of bed, and through that shift, I mean, like my whole life basically started to change and, really have a different tone to it. And that actual abundance and connection and grace started flowing in ways I would never have conceived of. So I'm definitely a stand on that service tip for sure.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because I had a journey with like that word service. And I remember in my mid 20s, mid to late 20s, really actually kind of worried about that word. I was like, oh, does that mean like I don't get to do what I want to do? Does this mean like total self-sacrifice? And I was like, really like, even though I was as deep as I was into like Course in Miracles and Buddhism and Toltec wisdom, I was still like, whoa, that word service does not sit well with me. Yeah. And then until I had a little paradigm shift, I was like, wait a sec. This actually can be the ultimate 2-for-1 deal.
For sure.
Serving yourself can actually end up being serving others, like meaning I can actually do what I love, and doing what I love actually is the product of help and transformations for other people. And so there isn't really this idea of like, service means you don't get to do what you want to do. You have to do what other people need. No, you can do exactly what you're super white hot passionate about.
Right.
And it ends up being the medicine that serves a particular community. And I was like, oh, when I finally had that paradigm shift, I was like, oh, phew, this is not going to be so bad after all. Let's go for it.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. The ultimate 2-for-1 deal towards a paradigm shift. Facts. And to be of effective service, we need like workability. And as you know, the market and the internet has become really saturated. And one thing I'm seeing a lot of creatives get super fed up with and having a loss of power and frustration towards when they share their work is a lack of engagement, recognition, and attention they receive online. And like it or not, like attention has become today's main currency. And with how saturated content has become on socials, organic reach has basically became totally obliterated, yet people are not evolving their behavior around it and keep like lazily doing the same and posting the same thing the same way and expecting different results. And like this leads to just further frustration from their lack of innovation and insights and experimenting. And this also leads to like negative impacts on people's creative outputs because they're frustrated, you know? And so with that said, one of the first things that comes to my mind that helps us stand out as creatives is liberating ourselves from being a victim of, for example, Instagram's algorithms of doom, and finding our authentic voice as content creators. And what are some of the things we can do, Wes, to help us create and discover ourselves as authentic in order for our content to shine?
You know, I think, God, putting yourself out there, you know, choosing a medium like I did with like podcasting and kind of Instagram Live helped be like, okay, I'm just turning it on and I don't really know what I'm going to say, but I'm committed, you know? And I think there's kind of, one of those methods is like, they call like finding your wings on the way down.
Oh shit.
And of course you represent something you have of knowledge and wisdom. But I think sometimes, man, it's like really accepting in the beginning that you have to find your flow. You have to find your rhythm. There is no escaping the growth that's necessary to do that. And I think a lot of people want to come out of the gate looking perfect and shiny because we do live in this consumer culture where like, oh, the first product, well, we're doing a mistake, a disservice by comparing ourselves to major brands like Apple. Or Nike, and we think we have to be on that level. Right. One of my favorite exercises I do for people who are starting to find a voice is like, go Google the first GoPro, like GoPro version 1.0. And what GoPro version 1.0 is a disposable camera in a waterproof housing that you strap onto your wrist. Damn. That's what GoPro 1 was. Okay. And so look, so I'm sure those guys had a vision that was beyond a disposable camera strapped to your wrist, right? But they had to start. And I think that's really something that we have to be okay with. And I'll tell you, I mean, you know, I've done tons of experiments under different names. And I think if you do have like some sort of like, you know, brand name or experience that you want to protect while you get your wings on the way down, maybe starting in a different genre. Like I've launched, you know, like guitar pedal review sites before. I had like a t-shirt clothing line called Future Earth Now back in 2001. Okay. And it's all these little things, you know, got me experimentation time. Until I came up with the Obsidian Blade, where I was like, okay, this is like all in now. I'm not going to fuck this one up. Like this is it, you know? So I think, you know, that's one part of it. You know, there's again, like removing that pressure so that you can get time in front of your audience. And literally there's like 1,000,001 tools, tips, and techniques out there to utilize. And I think that is definitely overwhelming. You can get on like technique overwhelm and strategy overwhelm for sure before you've even like figured out like what you want to talk about. And I think these days I'm really leaning, I think there's a trend in minimalism these days. And I think that's going to affect media as well. I think we don't need, dude, the MTV supercut vlog of your life, that is one form and it does work. But I think also providing, you know, like going deep rather than wide. And these days, like I'd say out of the 1,000,001 things you can do, like have a YouTube or have an Instagram or have, you know, an email list, choose like at most 3 and then go deep with your audience. You know, go deep, go real, go authentic, tell your story, share your struggles, and just like really, this is, you know, we're moving back into like just more like intimacy, you know, like no, everyone's going through transformation, everything's going through a struggle, and just really sharing that and being real is the first key there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. And just giving ourselves permission to be vulnerable and showing our process, both our wins and our breakdowns, regardless whether it's remotely perfect or not, and just having that courage. And I really love what you were unpacking there about like depth versus width as a content creator, preferring to reach like 10 people and emotionally touch, move, inspire them rather than have 100 people just like distractedly graze past your hard-earned content creation.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, so many people are caught up in the numbers, and it's like, what good is 100,000 Instagram followers, you know, to you if they don't actually, you know, convert into an actual movement?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of, you know, what we're talking about here is we're talking about creating movements, creating actual cultural change, creating intentional art that adds to a conversation that helps people or moves them or inspires them or even creates policy changes and cultural value changes. I mean, that's impact. That's about having impact. And so there's a phrase out there, you know, 1,000 true fans. It's a term Kevin Kelly came up with, I think around like 15 years ago or so. And, you know, he's one of the ex-editors of Wired magazine. And really, you know, when you do the math and you think about impact, I mean, we get so digital with everything. If there was 10 people in a room with you, you know, wanting to hear you, you would be pretty stoked with 10 people, right? Like 10 people in a room would be like, whoa, this is a little intimidating. There's 10 people here. Like, so why are we after 100,000 people when we don't even know what to do with 10 people? So, you know, scaling it down, making it real and going, you know what? If there was 10 people in a room, what's my vibe? How am I here to help? And then scaling from 10 people to 15 people, and then 20 people. And again, make it real. Like if 20 people were in a room or 50 people were in a room, you'd be like, whoa, I am crushing it with 50 people, right? So this virtualization thing is cool. Like, yes, let's reach everyone around the globe. Let's be effective in our communication. Let's create, you know, fun, engaging, entertaining media, you know, that's, you know, giving people, you know, quick tips and whatever, but we also got to go deep. And what does deep look like? And there is such a emphasis right now on like, what is your vibe? Are you within your vibration? Are you aligned with your truth? And I think that's, again, you know, going back to having that confidence of your true voice. If I'm in the center of my being and then I'm not really considering how I will be received, like getting beyond, you know, like getting into an imaginary third person's head about what you look like or how you sound, and just really get into your vibe and be like, I'm vibrating from the inside out. This vibration is for my perfect audience, my perfect crew. It does not matter if people don't get this because they're not in the vibe. So really getting comfortable with like not trying to be a one size fits all type of human being and be like, no, man, I want to be me serving others. That's really like what I've distilled my whole brand mission down. It's like, be you serving others, right? So you can be who you are, but you're also relevant to your audience.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. That's the motto. And to create, you know, those real movements with that depth that you talk about, another big topic I think we all need to like help get clear with is the word value. And when we're looking at our feed today, you know, we figure out really quick that we live in a fairly insecure, selfish, and narcissistic ecosystem. And I'll be straight up, like I see a lot of really dope creative content like on the daily, and I stay mindful towards supporting independent creatives like however I can. But to be honest, a lot of people's platforms are coming off like pretty self-serving and calls to actions left and right without really providing any initial value. For example, like download my new DJ mix, or repost this, buy that, follow my 18 accounts there, check out how cute I am, like me, pay attention to me, repost my shit, engage in all my shit. Like, why? Like, it's like, is it even remotely reciprocal? Like, we barely even know the majority of these people, and there's just too much content like out there hitting us too fast at a rate to be coming at us with all that. Like, and unless it really strikes value into our hearts, having us moved and inspired in a way we can distill that pragmatic value from, then why would anyone assume that people will engage with it, let alone throw our hard-earned money at it? Like, manufacturing the real accessible value is what makes your content work or not. It's that simple. And I'm just curious, Wes, like, what your take is there. Like, do you think value is proportionally being distilled in the ecosystem these days?
That's an interesting question. There's a lot of people at a lot of different levels, right? And there's a lot of people who are just waking up, whatever that means. Like, like, how do I talk if you're, like going out and dating? Like, how do I talk to a girl? Like, there's like a ton of content around that. So it's like, I think in any genre that you pick, the value is kind of relative to where that your segment of the audience is. And with any, audience that you're serving, there's always like a beginner, intermediate, and advanced section of that crowd, right? And it's kind of like a funnel. Like, at the bigger end of the funnel, there's a lot of people at the beginning, there's smaller people amount at the middle of the intermediate, and there's a smaller amount of people who are at the expert level. And that's true for any genre. So I think value is definitely like, who do you really want to serve, and what do they need to know, to get to the next level? And I think, when I don't know how, this weird word, service provider, I'm always trying to get into and pulse, okay, where is my audience really, really struggling? Like, I notice that, when you create value, if it's too like self-realized and motivational, a lot of people will understand it, but they can't use it, because where a lot of people are at is on the lower part of what's called as Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and where they're just struggling with safety, or they're just struggling with like getting the next paycheck or getting money. And so it's like, if you want your audience to do great things, then you have to address like, where are they stuck? And I think that's my definition of value right now, is like, how can I get them further along, their journey? And, a great analogy is that in the hero's journey, as someone who is providing the service and taking people on this hero's journey, you have to realize that you, to your audience, you're not the hero of the story, actually. Like, if we go back to that Star Wars analogy, when you serve an audience, you're not Luke Skywalker, you're actually Yoda. You're the wisdom that they're seeking so that they can fulfill their journey, not your journey. Right. So that is that switch up from like, the rock star, it's all about me, give me more album sales, to I'm turning from rock star back over to Yoda and be like, how do I assist you be the rock star? So that's that kind of flip there.
Yeah, most def. Such a valuable distinction there you touch on, aligned with the hero's journey and Joseph Campbell, where once we shift how we position ourselves as content creators from the Skywalker archetype to Yoda, as you mentioned, we can really like untap that effectiveness for our target audience and beyond. And it's kind of like, also, once we turn selfish into selfless, we like really unleash that power and start authentically crushing it.
Well, it's having empathy. That's the word, empathy, and I know Gary Vee is really on that, and that's amazing that he's brought that word to the mainstream as well. But it really is empathy. Like, this is not about you. It's about them, whoever you serve, and what part of the journey they are stuck at, and that you are an expert at serving, And if we, again, it's kind of interesting, when we think about even visual arts, as a service rather than visual arts as a rock star. Look at my hot new graphic. Buy my graphic. It's a fucking, koala eating an ice cream bar and everyone loves it. It's just like, what the fuck is that? Like, why the fuck is that shit popular? So I don't know. Just name any cute, it's cute. The cute economy. I get it. But, we're also at a point where we have in any department, any genre or segment of society, man, there is service that is being required now. And really to think about, like, how can art be a service, rather than self-serving, like I'm the next Andy Warhol, look at my innovative technique. Well, I think, we're really beyond that now. With the democratization of tools, thanks to the computer and people like Steve Jobs, we're all rock stars. We all make beats. We all make photos. We all do everything. We are all Salvador Dali, Andy Warhol, whatever you want to be. It's like, in the first Matrix movie, I know Kung Fu. Mm-hmm. You just download it. You are it. So in that type of economy, really, I think we have different purposes now.
Yeah, and when we give ourselves permission to be that Yoda, whether it's baby Yoda or expert Yoda, wherever we're at on that Jedi path, we can further break out of that algorithm of the system trying to like throttle down our altruistic endeavors and the movement we're ultimately trying to make.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Yeah, I don't even know where like things like Instagram and Facebook are headed, to be honest. Like they are kind of just entertainment distraction machines, and they're not deep. And the way I've been looking at this, it's that social media has been running strong for 10 years now, more, of course, starting with things like, Facebook and MySpace back in the day. But we're at this point now where, we've played basically in a virtual sandbox, and people have developed identities and expressions in this virtual sandbox. And I think it's really time to make what we've done in the virtual landscape a real thing. And this is serious because it's like, if you want social change, yes, you can seed ideas on Instagram and Facebook or YouTube, but it is not real power. It is not real societal policy change. Mm-hmm. And you understanding like, okay, use virtual reality, aka social media, to test things out and seed ideas, but then really take a real examination of like, what does it mean to actually physically transform not only your life, but to physically transform the people that you serve?
I feel that. And yeah, another way to serve them effectively is a word that I know you've entertained in the past, which is the word playfulness. And one thing I catch myself doing when creating work is forgetting to enjoy the process and getting too tied up on what the finished product is going to look like. And this can like really hijack our enjoyment while creating. And the magical word that comes to mind there is unlocking a playfulness in the creative process, which can, I feel, really like liberate ourselves from the rigid expectations we sometimes put on ourselves and the outcome. And this gives us, permission to fall back in love with the craft and actually enjoy again what we're doing. And I notice when I do this, my work tends to not only improve, but like more possibilities tend to manifest themselves when I'm aligned with enjoying what I'm doing, And Wes, you put it so succinctly in your Choice episode podcast a while back where you said, quote, "Playfulness leads to possibility. Possibility leads to entertaining feelings and vibrations, and feelings and vibrations become your new standard for what is possible. So may we enact heroic states of playfulness," end quote. So why should we lighten up and give ourselves further permission to untether, if you will, that inner child and just like kick it and get weird and experimental and present and playful, Wes?
Yeah, well, I think we're at tremendous point in time, what I call post-survival. And so, just like economies, right, there's booms and there's busts. And right now, as the biological species known as humanity, we're in a boom where we have created a back end of technology that's allowing us to not be so caught up in survival. And when I say survival, it's not just economic, but it's social. So back in the day, which is literally just 20 years ago, is where you had to get along with, quote unquote, your tribe or your social circle, right? There was a real downside with not agreeing with the dominant, unquestioned, beliefs that your community or family were holding. You would get kicked out. And back in the real back of the day, like, super survival times, look, if you got kicked out of your tribe, you would be killed by the elements or killed by a neighboring tribe. And that's where cohesion of belief played a strong point. And so we're at this stage where we've had these primal social engineering genes that it's locked us into cohesion. But we've now, thanks to internet, we've introduced so many alternative ways of living that people are like, whoa, I can do it this way or this way or this way or infinite ways and still survive. And actually I can let go of, if I need to, my community or my physical location or my family or the people I grew up with and choose. And choose what's right for me. And, it's interesting, I think you used an interesting word when you're mentioning it. You use the word allow. It's like, oh, what's allow? Well, we all had parents that clamped down on us on certain ways, or a society that clamped down on us in certain ways. And so we're conditioned to have what's called learned helplessness, or we're conditioned to police ourselves and not be in an experimentation mode. So I think, again, that's it. I mean, coming back to the freedom of experimentation and realizing that you won't die if you experiment. And that it sounds funny to say it like that, but it's like there is a primal side to you that is afraid of getting kicked out and not being loved if you experiment.
For sure.
And so you have to address that. And of course, I mean, there are still people in this day and age that do suffer persecution for being who they are, be that indigenous people who want to practice their ancient ways of connecting to the land, and say the Catholic Church comes into play and says, no, you can't, or for people who are expressing different forms of sexuality or gender. Yeah, there's better places to live on the planet for that than others. And so, of course, being in a safe space, but finding those safe spaces to be who you really are, and get back into playfulness, because I think we're sitting at a point where, look, that definition of insanity, doing the same thing but expecting different results, is now a global question of we can't keep doing the same thing because there's not enough resources to keep doing the same thing. There's not enough, you want to keep burning oil. You still want to have all the fucking politics and crazy shit that's going down in the Middle East due to a dependence on oil and all the shenanigans that go with that. It is insanity. So it's hopefully through this playfulness as entrepreneurs or artists or people on a particular path, we then remember, wait, there's a different way to do it. And it turns out, that different way to do it is sustainable, and so I think playfulness is innovation, and innovation is being requested across the board, again, from just not just technology and energy, but also social structure itself and personal psychology.
Right, for sure. Man, I love how you tie together playfulness and innovation like that, because the playfulness unlocks innovation. Whoa. And once again, it's when we're in this crippling fight or flight mode without engaging that play and experimentation with our work, we can't authentically create shit because it's not allowing for anything remotely resembling that flow state that we're after.
And it's a small window of time. Well, I just want to say it's a small window of time. And that's why I just want to end it on that idea with like economies. There's booms and busts. And this is a window of time. We don't have it forever. The dinosaurs didn't last forever. Like, you know, there's, it's a natural cycle. Things ebb and flow and expand and contract. And so that's why I think this moment is critical to take advantage of, you know, to question, you know, how everything generationally was done before you, societally done before you, and flip the script in alignment with what's really going to be sustainable, not just for humanity, but sustainable for all life, because we belong to all of life. We're not separate from all of life, and we need to get back in harmony with all of life if we want to be alive. Mm-hmm. And so I say, make your businesses, make your art, make your personal expressions around that conversation, because without a sustainable ecosystem, without a planet, you're dead. So what good is your brand?
Damn, real talk, my dude. And speaking to that, I would love to unpack that further and talk more about connecting with the land, because with all this helpful and pragmatic talk and approaches to creatively and entrepreneurially stay ahead of the rat race with like strategic pimping of pixels, if you will, like navigating across this ever evolving, rapidly changing social media landscape and internet, I think it's equally, if not more important, to have the tools to unfuck ourselves from the severed connection that our phones put between us and nature, and find ways to reclaim our sacred relationship with Mother Earth. Because if anyone hasn't noticed, people are literally like not even looking both ways down the busy street that they're walking across, and as they're like tethered to their phones, let alone oblivious as fuck that they're not aware that they're actually like on and directly tied to a living, breathing, conscious, sensitive planet called Earth. And I know you're super passionate about this topic too, Wes, and I'm curious how we can sober up from this technology substance abuse and get like really realigned back with our planet.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I think people are using their phones so much that they're getting into that habit of checking Instagram, that they're checking Instagram even when they're not looking at their phone. That's how fucking fucked we're getting right now. Like, I'm just watching people like checking Instagram without a phone as they're driving because they're checked out. And so it's like, I think we're at an interesting time spiritually, because science is actually kind of finally making discoveries that confirm what Buddhists knew and native wisdom elders and cultures knew, you know, even just 500 years ago, but thousands of years ago, is that we are nature. You know, there is a mental schism that happened to humanity at one point that started to kind of like have this, sort of nihilistic separation from the landscape. And when you get a separation from the landscape, you get every social problem that we have right now. And so, you know, science is now, and biology is beginning to understand that humans are actually a biological response to the environment. So we ourselves are born out of a conversation of cellular activity from the earth. And I think, you know, I know this is going to sound far out there, but the reality is, you know, science will confirm, where do your atoms come from? Oh, well, they come from former stars that went supernova, right? But then, well, they didn't just go supernova and make your body. What happened? Well, there was a process that we know. Our sun came into creation. It created a space-time magnetic field where it attracted elements, and then, you know, those star elements, and created planets. It created the planet Earth. And then from there, all the elements went into kind of cohesion and collaboration to, you know, create life. And it's like, boom, we're a continuation of a very interesting, energy system. And it is utterly bizarre to me that we could ever think ourselves separate from all that we're dependent upon. Not only are you dependent upon breathing air, but you're dependent upon the sun staying in the space fabric field of the sun and going around the sun and being at that perfect distance from the sun. So if I'm relying upon the earth to do its job, the earth is relying upon the sun to do its job, and the sun is relying upon other greater central suns to do its job. It is a complete collaborative, interdependent system of life. And it's like, oh, and then we're like, well, shit, I only got 20 likes on my Instagram. So, like our priorities are totally freaking screwed, And so I would say that I think the environment is showing us a conversation that we need to come back to. There's a lot of debate about climate change. The word climate change is a sticky one, the temperature rising and falling, which turns out to be a very quite natural thing. But what seems to be unnatural or not is the amount of say fires we just had in Australia and in California that we get every year, and how hotter and hotter they actually burn. There's even, in the latest Australian fire, right? There's just ground that has nothing on it, and the fucking ground is on fire. Okay. So you're like, okay, this is a little different. Okay. And then, have the opposite where, the ice caps are melting. That's not hype. That's actually real. You just go there and watch it and it's melting right before you. So if we look at everything more as communication, right? And that we're connected to this conversation because we are ultimately a biological response to that communication. So let's get back into the conversation. Rather than feeling so much like weird outsiders, let's become insiders again. And I think there's a great empowering movement that can happen with that, where we're no longer complaining about governments need to fix everything and why aren't they doing something. There is no they. There's only us, okay? And every one of us is an equal voting member of what happens in what we call reality, right? And you can get into the science of how reality is created, where our attention goes, energy flows. And so I think, for me, I stand for a great cultural shift called New Earth, and the environment and the lifestyle that represents, which means being in greater communication with the things that are sustaining us and honoring those things that sustain us and nurturing those things that sustain us as a high value thing in society, rather than what we currently have in mainstream society is we take everything from the earth. That's not some hippie made up bullshit. Look around your house. There is not one thing that's not from the earth here, by the way. There's not one thing that's not from the earth, right? A company went in, took raw elements and made it into your iPhone, or made it into that vase, or made it into a painting, or made it into a light bulb. It's all from the earth. But yeah, and then ripping you off, and then okay, so how often does Apple celebrate the earth from which it makes all its products? How often does, Ford Motor Company pray to the earth and be thankful to the fucking ultimately free elements, free fucking elements that it took out of the ground and made into a car, fucking free, and then charged you money for it, which is great. That's cool. We understand that system, but ultimately it was given to them for free. And where is the reciprocation? Where is the sustainability? Where is the love? Okay. And so I think, I could go on and on and on, but I see the cultural shift moving to understanding that all life is sentient, including the things that we don't think are sentient, which is all the elements that make everything in your life. And to come back into, natural wisdom or indigenous wisdom before, this psychological separation occurred and said, no, you're one with everything, and why not come back into healing that relationship so we can actually not only survive, but kind of fulfill our duty as stewards of this world. And my ultimate belief is, a lot of people believe in aliens, and a lot of people will say, oh, I'm a star seed. And I'm like, dude, have you even really been to Earth yet? And I think once we heal this relationship, I think the key thing is, look, we already belong to, at least on a biological level, right? Like I said, our planet is dependent upon the sun is dependent upon other suns, that cohesion. We belong to a larger body known as a galactic environment or a galactic community. If there is other sentient life out there, you better believe they have us on quarantine, because there's no way they would let a species that doesn't recognize its own planet to then go visit other planets with that same schism or disconnected attitude or sensation. So for me, I think the movement as an artist is to become sensitive and attuned to what Earth really is and how to sustain it and how to be in communication with it, so that if we clean up our act here and become stewards of life and creating commerces based on life, then we have a shot at rejoining this larger thing known as a galactic community, not only as, new members, but as equals. Mm-hmm. Because I think when we get into species maturity, I think this is the maturity that we've been seeking.
Right.
And I think that bigger thing is being asked of us. And so will you join it? Because I think if you don't join it, it's time's up.
Yeah, the clock is ticking for sure. Totally. And to be totally honest, it's really hard to not get fired up about that topic in the way you articulated that, Wes. And this space-time fabric of existence that we find ourselves in, it's so mysterious and vast and trippy and infinite and psychedelic, and I love it. And it's time to level up from our destructive patterns on both a micro and a macro scale to heal this conscious ball of clay we're kicking it on as real empowered creative stewards of the galaxy, and you talk a lot about humanity shifting into this 5D reality, and it's such a tricky, grandiose, and super abstract concept for many of us to wrap our heads around, including me sometimes. And can you put that into layman's terms for us, and what kind of behaviors and patterns and feelings, habits, structures, and even identities do we need to embody in order to align with this 5D vibration that you talk about?
Yeah, I think, on a practical level, we're moving out of linear time, and quantum mechanics really has already shown and proven, starting with Einstein, that past, present, future exist all at the same time. But what does that really mean on a practical level? And what it means is choice. Choice frees you from the dominant paradigm of a singular narrative, right? And that's what we're escaping from, is the singular narrative of a control-based system. And so I think when you get into the playfulness of time, that opens us up to this thing called infinite possibility, right? So a lot of people talk about past lives or future lives, but if all time is now, and quantum mechanics will state that is true, all time is now, that means that your past lives and your future lives are also, they turn out to be parallel lives. And so, again, this is just opening the door up to what some people would call alternate timelines. You can YouTube this thing called the Mandela effect, where certain segments of society have one memory of a shared cultural experience, and other people have a totally different version of that same shared cultural experience. Thus, edging us into this is our first baby step into parallel dimensions. And so the first step is we get one new parallel dimension. That's we're in kindergarten here, in quantum kindergarten. And so we're getting our first, taste of it with a parallel Earth, which some people again call new Earth, right? So that first conversation between old Earth and new Earth is starting up. And once people kind of jump over to this like idea of new Earth, that's when you're going to start to even edge up on 6D reality, which is like infinite parallel timelines.
Damn, son.
Right? So I think getting into quantum mechanics is fun, and again, it's really about choice and realizing that, okay, this is where you take what's known as your personal history and you say, you know what, my personal history isn't so set in stone as I think it is. Because even in brain science is showing that actually when we recall a memory, we're not even really recalling a memory. We're creatively creating a memory.
Whoa, mind blown.
Yeah. So it's like even memory is a creative act. And so if memory is a creative act, then you can give yourself the permission to create a new past. And when you're playing with time, well, this is like kind of like Back to the Future. If you go back in time and you change something in the past, it changes the future. This is called like timeline jumping. And so I think from a quantum mechanics level and from a psychological level, which also taps into universal shamanism, when we go in and heal a limiting story or a traumatic moment or a self-imposed belief, we can go in and rewrite things and give ourselves new opportunities, new parallel timelines that we can jump ourselves onto and live through. You are not committed. You don't have to be committed to retelling your past the way you retell it.
For sure.
It's an act of your own volition to be such an accurate historian. And it's like, stop being so fucking correct. It's like with your history and be like, let it go. And if it helps, create a new history because you're creating it anyway.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Our histories don't define us unless we apathetically allow them to. And it's weird to think about it like that though, but real talk, like we really are the masters of our history and futures, and the rules of the space-time continuum can kind of be bent with the will of our thoughts for sure. And so I hope everybody can give themselves permission to negate all that bullshit programming that's been perpetuated on us since we were little to keep us playing small. And as you talk about toying with alternate timelines, you've actually super inspired me more to toy with my own memories of the past and what I've made them mean about in a limiting way that still affect me to this day that I'm definitely committed to healing from. It reminds me of something that happened to me in my past specifically, amongst others, but when I was young, I was like literally obsessed with basketball, right? Like I played every night till dark. I dribbled the ball when walking to and from school. I studied Jordan fadeaway jumpers in slow motion on my mom's VCR, and I even like slept with a ball. It was basically like the center of my universe. And well, because I hadn't, discovered skating and weed and girls and hip hop and shit. So in 7th grade, I tried out for the basketball team, even though I was hella short. I hadn't fully tapped into like puberty yet fully. And to my demise, I didn't make the team. My spirit at the time was like decimated, and I put a lot of detrimental meaning on that event. I wrote like a long narrative that I wasn't skilled enough, fast enough, athletic enough, tall enough, basically just not enough. And this limiting belief I subconsciously let run amok significantly in my life, and I let it determine my worth when in reality, all that was is just a story that I made up that wasn't even real. It was a neutral event, and the only real thing about that bullshit narrative that actually technically happened was that my name wasn't written on a piece of paper determining which arbitrary group I was to be associated with, taped onto a gymnasium bleacher wall 20 some odd years ago. Like, the rest is all just a figment of my fleeting memories. So once we can separate like those neutral events that constantly are happening to us in our lives from the meaning that we put on the neutral events that often take our power and potential and possibilities away, we can then like really step into the freedom and become the captains like of our starships. You feel me?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really comes down to, the question, you've got to expose what you're telling yourself, right? So that's about having a mindfulness and meditation system in your life. Expose, like catching, oh, I'm saying that thing, to myself, and wait a second. The first question is, is it true? And then to play with possibility, and say, well, what if it's not true? And if it's not true, then what else is possible? And kind of tying, back into the quantum, theme here is also, quantum mechanics will also identify that when we look out into the universe, what's the universe, which we also are part of that universe, what is us/the universe made up of? Well, it's at least 95% energy, dark matter, dark energy, and only about 5% physical matter. And some people would even go on, like say on the atomic level, it's 99.99999% energy, and that one little 0.0001 physical matter. And so really, phrases like your vibe attracts your, tribe, turns out to be really, really true. And so this is why having a committed, deep inner work, discipline is so essential, because look, you are the universe. You can't escape that. So start acting like it. And so if the universe is at least 95% vibration energy, then so are you. So start figuring out what's your vibe, what's holding your vibe back from being completely exactly what you want it to be. Because when you catch yourself writing a script that you have to then live out, you're like, well, this is weird that I would even write a part of my own story that was defeated or less than, when you're really like, well, if that's optional, why am I so freaking chemically addicted to retelling disappointment or retelling suffering? And you have to fucking own, this is where you have to take massive responsibility to create change on a chemical vibrational level. And again, chemistry is a response to the vibration of your thinking. That is proven in epigenetics. So thinking, like, I love saying that phrase, like thoughts are real things, because thoughts set into motion a vibrationally matching chemical response in your body suit that you end up feeling and living into. And so, yeah, you are first and foremost the landscape of your own thinking, and then your outer environment goes to match what you believe about yourself, but ultimately you're responsible for those beliefs. And so, again, tapping back into infinite possibility, well, let me stop being an infinite bitch to my own thinking, and let me start entertaining like the freedom code of like doing whatever I want, especially in alignment to life itself.
For sure. And getting Charles Dickens with that typewriter of our lives and bossing it around with accountability to author like the trajectory of our lives the way we envision them to be, rather than just being like a dandelion subject to whichever direction the freaking wind is blowing. And speaking about dark energy and dark matter, that's, an undeniable component of our universe. I know that you're a proponent of integrating the shadow self. So what are your thoughts on spiritual bypassing in a time when so many inauthentic, self-proclaimed woke spiritual influencers like keep stating things like good vibes only type hashtags that are polluting the bandwidth and becoming super mainstream. And I'm curious, Wes, like how can we really mindfully integrate our shadow side in like a workable container in our lives and worlds?
Yeah, and I think the real understanding of what the shadow is that the fact, kind of going back to that same ratio of 95% to 5%, that 95% of your thinking is subconscious programming. And only 5% of your thinking is conscious programming. And that's not some sort of weird power imbalance. There's a real like cohesion there of how that works. But, so that your subconscious, like when you walk up to a door, you're not spending 3 hours figuring out what a door is. You've got it in stored memory, but also in your stored memory is automatic, super efficient ways of how you interact with your lover, how, as modeled by your parents and society, how you earn money as modeled by your parents and your society. And though, if you've noticed, how relationships go down and how money is made has shifted from the time you were a baby, from age 0 to 7. And so shadow work really is understanding like you've got things on tape loop. We're built for efficiency. So it's not that you want to like complain that you have shadow. It's like the reason why the subconscious is genius is it's built for efficiency. Like I said, like what a door is before you even walk up to the door. It's fast, it's super efficient. Now imagine taking all those subconscious beliefs that limit your true desires and having them on command and as automatic as you knowing what an apple is, or you knowing how to open a door, or you knowing how to drive a car, right? All those things are just like, you don't even have to think about it. What if you got to that super efficient place of like, I don't even need to think about how to make $1 million. I just make $1 million. Boom. Like getting that deep with the subconscious is really what I see the benefits of again working with the shadow.
For sure. And that's really interesting how you fuse the shadow and the subconscious, that I think is really underestimated and valuable to be aware of how deep that connection is between them, for sure. And it's fascinating how much the subconscious really is actually running the show without us even being aware of it. It's a trip. The last topic I want to delve into with you, Wes, is meditation. Why are you out here meditating so hard? Like, I know you're such a proponent of it, and you're such an inspiration to constantly practice with your discipline of getting up at like 5 a.m. and sitting for 90 minutes every day. And it attests a lot to how you show up in the world. And I'm just curious for all the creatives, like what's really behind the power of meditation and how can we leverage it to boost flow states and to creativity as well as just our well-being as a whole?
Yeah, I think again, it's the very magic hour. And, getting up at 5, for a lot of people believe, or even people who get up at 4 to meditate, is that, this is really understanding, again, thoughts are physical things. So if the collective of your neighborhood is waking up and making breakfast and getting all their busy thoughts and thinking about bills, thinking about getting the kids to school, thinking about all this fucking mundane shit, that is clouding the collective energy field, which you are not separate from. So again, kind of dipping into the shadow work, which this meditation gives you access to, is understanding that you are part of a collective, and that collective field of energy matters. And I think as we go into what's known as the Aquarian age, that's a theme that I'm really bridging right now, is like collective health matters. What is the collective vibration of your home and the collective vibration of the neighborhood in which you live? And understanding how maybe your vibration can contribute to elevating the vibration of that system, you know? And so, getting up before the Joneses is a sure way to align with what's true to you, align with your connection to the earth, to give thanks for another day of living, to all the elements that come together, selflessly to support you, like the trees making oxygen and everything like that. But I think also what's really understood in neurology now is that, the brain has different frequency states. And the way that you are programmed age 0 through 6 is the same state that you're in when you wake up and just before you're going to bed. And that's called theta state. And theta state is the same state of what they call hypnosis, right? So when you're basically 0 through age 6, you're in a state of hypnosis with zero barrier. You are defenseless, mentally defenseless, age 0 through 6, 7 years old, to the world around you, because you're needing to rapidly adopt the patterns and the programs around you in order to fit in with your family and your tribe, in order to survive and get love and be nourished, as well as understand like all the basics of how everything works in the world. But again, that world that you grew up in doesn't exist anymore. Right? So you cannot expect to have a different future by, retelling the past. And so for me, it's really, multiple levels of like, I want to have a different future. I want to have a future that's more in alignment with my truth. I want to have more of a future that's in alignment with serving the needs of my community. I want to, exfoliate any limiting beliefs. So getting into deep silence in that theta brainwave state allows you to rejoin the existing conversation. A lot of people have the mistake of thinking that meditation is about silencing the thoughts. It is not. It's actually identifying and listening to what you're saying, but what you've been saying like in a tape loop that's now receded to the back of your brain or somewhere deep in your brain. And it's not that it's silent. It's kind of like you become numb to anything that's on repeat. So this is provable even in your own environment. You put on the washing machine, right? And at first you can hear the washing machine, and say you're working at your desk and you can hear the washing machine, but notice over 10 minutes, you stop hearing the washing machine, but the washing machine didn't stop. Right? So that's the same with our own repetitive belief systems and repetitive thinking and repetitive modeling and mirroring of the people around us. At first, it's very noticeable, very shocking. And then we become normalized to the pattern and we recede it to the background. But it didn't really go silent because it's still just as loud, because you're still operating on those codes, So meditation again is the avenue, not just for relaxation. Sorry, yoga, branding, lifestyle bullshit. Meditation is a portal, the portal to liberation, liberation that's spoken about in Buddhism, where you really begin to feel the impact of your own thinking. And I call it sobriety, right? Like you want to get to that state where you can see a thought, because it's a sequence, right? Thoughts then trigger chemical responses, because a thought is a picture and we have a response to those pictures. So you want to catch yourself having a thought, witnessing the temptation to then have a chemical response, a physiological chemical response, and then say, you know what, I'm opting out of the response and I'm opting out of the thought itself. And so we're all freaking drug addicts to our own thinking. And so we really want to get in, this is why meditation is like the dopest thing ever, because if you want a shot at being something that's really true to you, you've got to stop spending your power on who you were. And this is, like I said, getting silent, getting still in the body, and witnessing that connection between thought, chemical response, and then physiological tension relieving tension, relieving physiological response, relieving the original thought that created all of it, and coming into spaciousness is really the path. And this is where people can experience natural DMT release from their pineal gland. And I will say, like, yeah, it's like I can't really plan for it right now, but when you get a spontaneous DMT release, it's really awesome. It's really manageable, and it's not like taking a hit of something. It's like the most organic, natural way it's meant to be, of like, oh, I just popped into some other dimensional realm for 1 to 2 seconds, got the download, and then pop back out. And there's no psychological trauma from it. There's no recuperation time, because it was super gentle. It was super just like, whoa, oh, I'm in another dimension. Oh, and now I'm back. And you know, and maybe I'll be really good where that lasts even longer and longer and longer. But again, you know, the science is in, the benefits are super strong. Again, one of the main benefits when you do that work between relieving history, relieving thinking, relieving the chemical response and the physiological response to your own history and thinking, is that you do what's called resetting the nervous system. And so when you sit in silence, you also allow a chance for the body to say what it's holding on to. And so I also will experience, I'll have like spasms or natural real spinal realignments, because again, the body self-organizes itself into health. Health is its default, but you've got to give time to your body to heal. And so when you meditate, it's also a healing moment of self-organization. And again, like I have, it'll become obvious, like, whoa, why is this shoulder over here? You know, and like you'll be like, well, that's weird that I hold my head in this particular angle. Why? And you start to be like, well, let me breathe. Let me get sensitive where I'm holding tension. And then when you do that, then you really find the dialogue of health and alignment. And it's just profound what your body knows what to do. It's really, you know, better than Iron Man's suit in the Marvel movies.
I'm feeling that metaphor for sure, man. Meditation really is the dopest thing ever, and a surefire way to really like level up and get clear and empowered and help show up as a dynamic, creative juggernaut for sure. And I know when I don't do it for a few days, I can definitely tell. Like, I'm a 20-minute late morning meditator guy with the aid of a meditation app called Headspace that I really like. And there's also a lot of other helpful apps out there that I've found useful for guided meditations and structure and such, like Calm, 10% Happier, Insight Timer, and Waking Up, that are also some good avenues.
Yeah. And your excuses are over. You know, people are like, oh, I don't have time for it. Well, you have to just make more time for it. And that really starts by going to bed earlier. Like if you want to have an hour to meditate and then you go to bed at an hour earlier and you wake up that hour earlier and you claim it for your future. You claim it for having better relationships with self and with others. Yeah. And you just stop the excuses, and it's really about having that discipline to do it. And again, you know, if you're not used to doing it, you lower the bar, you know, and you know, one of the techniques for lowering the bar is actually deciding the night before, or, you know, where is your dedicated meditation space going to be in your house? I highly, highly, highly recommend sitting on a few cushions or pillows so that your hips are above your ankles. And I think the number one, this is the number one reason why people fail at meditation is because their body hurts because they're sitting on the ground. I think it's the biggest fuck up, and nobody says it. And I see whenever you Google a picture of people meditating, their ass is on the ground, and I'm like, dude, that is the number one way to then your back has to go into counterbalance, and you actually end up leaning forward in this weird way, and it's very strenuous on the body. It's like the whole point is to get into stillness. And so to get into stillness, be kind to your body, sit on a few cushions. You just want to be around, whatever, like, I don't know, somewhere around 6 inches, a little higher than your ankles, not too high, not too low, the Goldilocks zone of how that feels good to you, but just high enough where you're like, I'm not doing that weird thing where my abs are not free to breathe and my back is like kind of leaning forward and I'm really suffering in the lower back. I think people really lose out. And I see people sitting on the couch. Don't sit on the couch. Sit on the ground with a few cushions. You're going to be so golden. And the other key thing is that people are showing and proving is true. Soon as you wake up, you want to do it, I think, as soon as you wake up, but go to the bathroom, have your morning pee, and then drink a minimum of 24 ounces of water. This is going to cleanse your mind. It's going to refresh your mind in the most possible way. You don't need, a lot of people do like lemon and salt. You don't have to do that later. That's cool stuff too, but avoid caffeine, avoid, all these teas and stuff, because again, you're already on something. It's called your thinking. You're already high as fuck on your thinking. Don't add more chemicals like food or caffeine on top of this drug experience you're having called your own thinking. And so and the biological response that you're having to your own thinking. So water, ass on some cushions, sit down, and start to breathe from the diaphragm, get still, and just be like, and to allow yourself the first 5 minutes, even for me, after all these years, and I started meditating when I was about 21, I'm now 47. It's like, even the first 10 minutes for me, 5 to 10 minutes, I'm like, oh shit, this is going to suck. Like,
for sure.
It's like, some days it's painful, but if you stick with it, you breathe, you're like, but all that sucking is just really starting to expand the breath and to draw the breath even deeper in through the diaphragm, which is, below your rib cage. It goes all the way across the central part of your body. Start breathing from the diaphragm, drawing in more air, sending that air down towards the pelvis to the root chakra, and really just, rolling your shoulders back, making sure your neck and chin are in a good position. Maybe lifting the center of your rib cage up to the sky a little bit more, like I call it lifting the heart. And just put your arms in don't do any of this fucking stupid ass mudras. Again, if you Google this shit, you're just like, no, that is too, just put your hands in a nice folded, one hand supporting the other hand in your lap. That's a great place to start. And just breathe and feel good and just feel yourself. That's really the first step to meditation. Just be who you are and feel it. And again, don't pick up the phone, because again, we've got to sober up from dopamine culture, right? Where the doing what's easy is taking you off the path to doing great things. And, so checking social media as soon as you wake up not the move. It involves you in the world, in quotes, and makes you concerned with a bunch of other shit that's not your shit. And it's like, it's like, if you want to innovate, you got to originate by aligning to the truth of who you are. So look, you can, reward yourself after an hour of self-care or 2 hours of self-care in the morning with your coffee and with your social media. Set that up as a reward, but do the hard stuff. Go to the gym of your mind and get some real command over there of who you really are. And like I said, detox from the shit that's been on repeat. And that's the essence of meditation right there, man.
Got it. You are literally making it rain with Obsidian Blade $1 million tips right now in so many ways, my dude. Tips on tips on tips.
Yeah, just the Obsidian Blade tip. You can get pregnant by that, by the way.
Man, homie, so much gratitude for you with all of your unpacking of all these pragmatic gems of wisdom, Wes. You've shared some really special insights today for everybody, and I definitely appreciate it. Is there anything else you would like to share with the listeners of what you're up to in the community, any new endeavors, personal projects, business offerings, or services in your world right now, as well as what the best ways are to get a hold of you?
Just go to theobsidianblade.com. You know, if you're really struggling with something in your life and you just want that 10,000 foot view of clarity, you know, I offer this thing called shift sessions. It's an hour to an hour and a half deep dive where we get handled what you want to do with your life and put in place some real strategies and techniques to sustain that. And then planning for creating a retreat in Teotihuacan, Mexico. And it's going to be pretty badass. You know, I'm all about practical spirituality and empowerment and embodiment. So it's going to be ancient Toltec Mexica wisdom, learning how to meditate, get into these states of universal shamanism, so that you can be a more empowered creator for this new environment of a 5D new earth, as we like to talk about. And yeah, and we will be relaunching sometime soon the Human Infinite course, again, where we make practical and embodied all the superpowers that your body comes with, and that you are meant to rediscover and live into, so that you can, you know, create that life that you want to create.
Yep.
And contribute and serve in ever more powerful and exciting ways.
I love that. And your content is definitely a launching pad for so many of us to do exactly just that. And I really appreciate your time and commitment to your work, and look forward to what you and the Obsidian Blade have in store for us down the road, Wes.
Thank you, Dylan. This is awesome, man.
For sure, man. It's an honor and a privilege. And thank you to the listener. I hope y'all were able to distill some value from it, and hope everyone has a blessed day. Peace.